This morning's speaker is Judge Angela Cox. Melissa Nelson, an attorney with the international law firm of McGuire Woods, will lead today's discussion. Ms. Angela Cox will now share her journey of becoming a judge by highlighting the transformative experiences that prepared her for the leadership roles she fulfills today. We will also have time for about 8 questions in our question and answer segment, followed by a reception catered by Taylor Leadership Institute's community partner, Jason's Deli, at the close of the event. Please join me in welcoming Attorney Melissa Nelson and Judge Angela Cox.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for having us today. It is a true honor to be able to chat with my very dear friend, Judge Angela Cox, about her personal story and her professional story. I think for those of you who have not had the opportunity to hear her talk before, this likely will change your perspective about a lot of things today. So with that, Judge Cox, will you tell the group today, first tell us about your professional background.
Okay, before I begin, let me say thank you for being here and taking time out of your schedule to be here. We count it an honor to be able to impart some things into you as it relates to leadership. I also would like to say the family here, the staff that was standing against the wall that was introduced, they have become like family to me. We've partnered together in our cause of introducing leadership to young people and making sure that you have the tools that you need in order to be successful in your career and your personal lives. But as I sit today, I am on the county court judge here in Duval County. I was appointed to the bench by Governor Jeb Bush in 2005. Prior to that, I was an assistant state attorney here in Duval County in the 4th Judicial Circuit, which encompasses Clay, Duval, and Nassau counties. I was an assistant state attorney for 6.5 years before being appointed to the bench, which is very early. I was very blessed that Governor Bush saw not only my experience as a lawyer, which for some they thought it was minimal, but he also saw my life experiences, and he thought that that made me mature beyond my years in practicing law, and he thought that I would make a good county court judge. So he chose me, and I'm so grateful for that. I will say, for those of you who are not familiar with the area of law, with the legal arena, that you can practice criminal or civil. I like to tell people who aren't familiar with it, anything that's not criminal is civil. Anything that's not civil is criminal, because civil encompasses so much. But I practice criminal prosecution as a practicing lawyer here in the 4th Judicial Circuit.
How old were you when you were appointed to the bench? 33. I applied when I was 32, and I turned 33 right before I got appointed. I know, but for the group, were you the youngest judge in this circuit appointed?
That's what I've been told. The governor's office stated that I was the youngest. I know that there were some around that age that got elected, but you can become a judge either by getting appointed or elected by the people and appointed by the governor. And once you're appointed by the governor, you have to sit for re-election, which I have done twice without opposition, thankfully. But I was the youngest appointed according to statistics.
Judge Cox, why is leadership an important topic for you to speak about?
I think it's important for all of us to realize that even if we don't intend to become leaders, we are leaders. Because everywhere you are, people are watching you, whether it's your younger siblings, your coworkers, your classmates. They're observing something about you that may cause them to make a decision one way or the other. So you are leading, whether you choose it or not. So I think it's important that as individuals, we embrace our leadership skills. We try to hone them and become better at them, so that when people are watching us, that we're taking them in the direction of success versus failure.
Will you tell this group about your personal background?
Yes. I grew up in inner city Detroit, Michigan. I was raised by my grandmother because my mother was addicted to crack and heroin, and my father was absent. My mother got pregnant with my brother at 15 and pregnant with me at 16. So we were 11 months apart. It was like we were twins almost, because there were about 18 days when we were the same age. That's how close together she had us. But when she became addicted to drugs, my grandmother took over rearing us, and she was responsible for our care. But as a result of how I was growing up, not having my parents, My mother being addicted to drugs in our neighborhood, so I got teased a lot. We both got teased a lot because there were our friends that were selling drugs to her, so they would see us and say, Linda was behind the school buying crack this morning, so I had a really bad attitude. My brother, on the other hand, had a great attitude. He was an A student. He was not an A-B honor roll student. He was an A student. He wanted to be a lawyer. He had a very positive attitude about life, and I took everything personally. So I had a very poor attitude. I was disrespectful to adults that were trying to help me. I got into fights on a regular basis. I had the poorest attitude. If somebody looked at me wrong, they got punched in the face, I got kicked out of school. And that was the circle that I was going around until 10th grade. And because of my attitude, it caused my grades to drop. I was skipping school. I was getting kicked out of school. I was just going nowhere fast. And my grandmother died when I was 15 years old. And when my grandmother died, my maternal aunt, who lived in another part of Detroit. Now, it's interesting when you think about perspective. My aunt lived in a 900 square foot house. So that's smaller than many of your apartments. A 900 square foot, 2-bedroom house with her and her son. She was a single mom. She took in 2 teenagers, me and my brother. And we thought we were rich because we moved into a house versus being in the projects. And we had some stability. So we were very grateful, but my attitude was still poor. And I got kicked out of school, and my aunt said, if you don't like the life you're living, you need to change it. And I heard her, but I didn't do anything about it. And my brother, who was an A student, wanting to go to law school, smart as a whip, he got shot and killed when I was 17 and he was 18. And that was my only sibling. And I decided that day, if he can't make it out of the projects in Detroit, then I certainly cannot make it unless I make some changes. And I turned in a completely opposite direction of where I was going. I changed my attitude. I tried to work on my grades. I tried to do my very best to become who I wanted to be and make my life what I wanted it to be.
I know the question that everybody has that I've asked you many times over the years, how? How?
It was a difficult transformation because you have all of these prejudices and bias in your own mind about what you can and cannot do. And for a long time, even though I wanted to change, I felt like I couldn't change. I knew people had certain expectations of me because of my attitude, so that if I even tried to do something good, people would say, well, you know, next week she'll be fighting. You know, she's a fighter. And so I had to break down some of the walls that I put up for myself. So my aunt, who was a high school graduate, by the way, she had not graduated college, she had 7 friends from high school. They have all become my surrogate aunts. And all of them had different attributes that I was able to observe that I wanted to become a part of who I was. Those women corralled around me and gave me a family. They gave me support. They taught me so many things about being a lady. Because when I grew up in the projects, everybody was smoking weed, selling drugs, hanging out, having sex. That was all I knew. And these women showed me that there was more to life than just doing that. So it was being mentored by these women, seeing their example of going to work every single day, paying their bills every single day, being responsible, being articulate. And I think out of all of them, only one had a college degree. Everyone else were high school graduates. But they were an example before me. So I started to learn some things from them. And as I've related in the past, if any of you have seen the video that I did for UNF, you learn along the way. So you're learning from people. Even today, I'm learning from people. And you are always improving. You should always be at a place of constantly improving who you are, what your perspective is, and always moving in a direction forward and not going backward. So it was the example of other people that helped me to start to change who I was.
How important do you think the attribute of attitude matters when you're talking about in the context of leadership?
Attitude is so important because if you change your perspective, everything else around you will change. And your attitude can determine how far you go. And you hear that in leadership all the time. Attitude determines your altitude. You know, they have all those sayings. But it's true. If you have a negative attitude about life, it will permeate into every area of your life. If you have a positive perspective on life, it will permeate into every area of your life. And as a leader, you always want to be thinking positively about yourself and about others. You always want to be thinking of ways to improve whatever route you're taking in life. How can I improve? How can I become better? But your attitude certainly determines where you go and how far you go. And I think for me, changing my attitude changed the perspective of how I saw myself, because I thought life was very unfair. I thought about all the people that had their parents. I thought about all the people that had name brand clothes, and I didn't. I thought about all the people that still had their siblings. So I thought life was very unfair. And then I heard a saying once, if nothing else around you changes, you change. And so that helped me to develop the attitude that I can do whatever I want in life. There's nothing that I can't do in life if I put my mind to it. So your attitude will certainly take you in the direction where you wish to go.
Mentorship is a very important thing to you personally. It is professionally. Why do you, tell this group about why you think mentorship is so important in the context of leadership?
When you think about being a leader, you want to emulate people who are good leaders. And you want to be a leader that people are not only going to follow, but want to follow. So a mentor helps you to maneuver around pitfalls. They're a sounding board for you. Your mentors will help you to overcome things that they went through and how they overcame it. They can give you ideas. They can just listen and give you advice about things that you face. It was very important to me to have people to look up to, especially in the judiciary and as a practicing lawyer, because A, I was new to Florida. B, you always want to improve, and you can only improve by seeing other examples of people who do it well. So it's important to find someone you can look up to, who you can use as a sounding board, who can help direct your career, your personal goals, your social goals. Those people are so beneficial to you in the long run. An example is when I wanted to become a judge. I had no clue how to become a judge. I knew judges got voted for, and I knew judges could get appointed, but I didn't know what steps to take. So I sat down with my mentors, the judges I looked up to, the attorneys I looked up to, and I said, how do I become a judge? And I took a long legal pad, and I took furious notes. And every single day I checked off something on my list. And if I got to something on my list and I really didn't know how to maneuver it, I would ask my mentor, what is a way, how can I approach this person? What can I say? What's gonna hurt me when I talk to this person about this? How can I get around that? Your mentors are invaluable to you in becoming a better person and a better professional, and to become the leader that you want to be.
You're an intentional thinker, obviously. And how do you think about intentional thinking and the value of it when you decide to set your sights on a goal?
I think it's important to have a vision, and leaders are visionaries. And my definition of leadership, as I've heard it from other people, and I'll say everything that I share with you today, I've learned from other people. So I hope you're learning it from me if you haven't heard it before, or you're being reminded of it. If you've heard it before, it's being brought to the forefront of your thinking. Every leader has a vision, and the leader has the ability to motivate, encourage, and inspire people to reach their personal, professional, and social goals by being more productive, more effective, and more efficient. So if you want to be a good leader, you should be inspiring people, motivating people, encouraging people. But you should also have a vision for your life. And when you have a vision for certain areas, you want to make the biggest vision possible. And then you want to break it down into smaller goals. And you hear the saying, how to eat an elephant one bite at a time, I think people say. You have a great big vision, break it down into small goals, and reach one goal at a time until you get to where you want to be. Don't be afraid to rewrite your vision. Because something may happen in your life that may say, the vision I had to do this has impacted me in a different way. Maybe I'll rewrite my vision and do this now. So don't be afraid to reevaluate and rewrite your vision. But intentional thinking is so important, because if you have in your mind, you have to see it before you can see it. Think about an architect. They put something on paper before we ever see it built in our neighborhoods. They have a vision. They see it before they see it. So the same way with your life. You want to see it, before you see it. I remember when I was applying to become a judge and people kept telling me, you're such a good lawyer, in about 5 more years you should apply. You're too young now. And these are people who I trust, who I believe have my best interests at heart, but they truly believed I was too young. So I started envisioning myself in my black robe with my hand raised, taking my oath. So every time somebody said something negative to me, I would picture myself in my black robe, raising my right hand, taking my oath. And then I had people who they said, you need their support. If you don't have their support, you won't get it. If I asked for their support and they said no, I would see myself in my black robe, raising my right hand, taking my oath. So you have to intentionally think about the things that you want to see in your life, have a vision and write it down, and move in that direction every step. And you cannot let negativity and what other people think about you deter you from the goals you have for your life.
I've heard you say on many occasions, be a person that people want to follow, not have to follow. So in your own life, how do you accomplish that? How do you inspire and motivate people?
I think first you motivate people to want to follow you by being a good example, being a person of integrity, keeping your word, being honest in your dealings, being on time. All of those things we hear in leadership and you're hearing in your classes and you're hearing at these bureaus, you have to do that yourself. And you want to build relationships. You want to make the personal deposits into people. So every single time I mentor someone and I listen to what their issues are and I share my time with them, I'm giving into those emotional deposits. I'm creating a bank account of emotional and goodwill with that person. So that inspires people to want to follow you and be the type of person you are because you care. You give them your time. You're an example before them. You're not just asking them to do what you want them to do. You're doing it. So you want to be a good example, make emotional deposits into people by caring about what is taking place in their lives, and you want to make sure that you listen to them when they have concerns and help them to address those concerns, even though you're the one in the leadership position.
You have a guiding principle that has been a question that I know personally you ask yourself frequently. Will you share what that question is with this group?
Yes. Many people measure their level of success by material things. I've reached my goal for success because I live in a certain house. I reached my goal for success because I drive a certain car. I've gotten married, I've had kids, I'm successful. But I try to follow the mantra of how many people are better off because you live. Yes, you may have all those things and have reached a level of success, but are you really successful if you aren't impacting other people with the gifts that you have? Each of us are uniquely blended with talents, giftedness, life experiences, and we should use those things to inspire and instill the best in others and bring out the best in others. So I routinely ask myself, how many people are better off because I lived? Is this group going to be better off because I lived? Because I spent my time here and shared my time? And I think we all should have that question, ask ourselves that question throughout our college careers, our professional careers, our personal lives. How many people are better off because I lived? Because you are a leader. Whether you want to be one or not, you are a leader. My suggestion to you and my challenge to you is to become the best leader you can in your sphere of influence.
How do how do these folks listening to you today, how do they find that blend of attributes that makes them unique and tap into the gifts that each one of us has, but that's different from the next person?
I think it's important to look within yourself and see what your natural abilities are. I think it's important to consider what your weaknesses are so that you can make them strengths or see them as strengths, or how you can hone in on those weaknesses and make them strengths. But we each have some type of talent or gift. And you may sometimes believe, I don't have any talent or gift. But really look into yourself, think back to when you were younger, things that you like to do, things that you were naturally good at, and those are your giftings. And you want to tap into those, and you want to find a way to use them to benefit yourself and others. You want to refrain from comparing yourself to others. And I think this is so important for emerging leaders. Don't compare yourself to other people. That is different from learning from other people. Comparing yourself to other people means you're like this next to them and you're watching how they do something as compared to how you do it in a negative way. Comparing yourself does one of two things. It makes you feel superior or inferior, neither of which is a heart that can be used. Because when you feel superior, you become arrogant, narcissistic, and nobody's going to want to talk to you, be around you. Or they're going to be talking about you behind your back. Or you feel inferior. And when you feel inferior, you're now downplaying your gifts, your talents, and your attributes. So you don't want to be at either one of those places, superior or inferior. That means you need to have on blinders and just focus on where you're going. But at the same time, you want to balance that with being able to positively look at another person, see what attributes they have and how you want to add them to your repertoire. You'll see things you don't want to add. If you see somebody with a really bad attitude who always spouts off at the mouth because their thing is, I'm saying it because I'm going to be blunt, I'm going to say it. Those kind of things aren't positive and it's not attractive. So you may see negative things in someone and say, I want to make sure I'm not like that either. Or I see that in her. I think that's a great attribute to have. Is that in me? And how can I accomplish making that a part of who I am? So it is a fine line between comparing and learning from someone, but I think the mindset is what matters, not being negative about it when you watch someone else, because we all have gifts and talents. I make a wonderful Judge Cox, but I make a terrible Judge Day, Judge Hudson, Judge Wilkes. I'm not like any of them, although I've taken so many attributes from them. Judge Wilkes is one of my most favorite judges, and I practiced in front of him for a long time, and he had the best judicial temperament. And I thought, if I ever become a judge, I want to be just like Judge Wilkes. I don't want to raise my voice at people. I don't want to treat people disrespectfully. I want to have a great judicial temperament. From Judge Day, he did a great plea colloquy. And those of you who aren't in the legal field or have not been familiar with it, plea colloquy is what you say to the individual when they want to plead guilty. And his was so thorough. I was like, if I ever become a judge, I'm doing my plea colloquy just like Judge Day, because that is excellent. And I bet he'll never get reversed on appeal. And to this day, I use Judge Day's plea colloquy. So you have to find that fine line to develop your gifts and your attributes without comparing yourself to other people.
How do you employ self-reflection in your own life?
Every single day. Every single day I'm looking inside myself because I want to make sure I'm doing my very best. Because yes, I'm a leader where people look at me and see me as a leader. So I know people are watching me, but you should be doing the same thing. Every day you should be reflecting on your day. Did I live this day with purpose, or was I just going about my day? Did I live my life with purpose? Was I respectful? All the attributes you think are important, did I employ those today? And if not, let me start over tomorrow and do better. So every single day I'm reflecting on the type of person I am, the type of leader that I am, because I know I'm impacting other people and I want to do it in a positive way and not a negative way.
Fear often prohibits people from pursuing their highest and their best, or even their goals. And you've talked before about it only takes one yes. And in fact, this morning, someone who's seen you speak before commented on how that impacted her. Will you share your story about it only takes one yes?
I think so often we get discouraged when we're applying for scholarships, trying to get into schools, trying to get a certain job, and somebody says no to us. I started to change my perspective about that because growing up the way that I did, my study skills were horrid. So when I started to want to do well in school, I was behind everyone else. Although I was studying hard, meeting with the professors, doing extra credit, my grades still never added up to my counterparts. But I knew that I was smart and I knew that I could do a good job, but my GPA did not reflect it. So I started to think, if I get a no, I need to see it as a blessing. So my mantra became, because I'm a woman of faith, so my mantra became, man's rejection is God's protection. If they say no to me, so be it. I'm done with being upset about it. So I applied to 10 law schools. I only got into one. They called me Your Honor. They called the judge that graduated from Harvard Your Honor. We make the same amount of money. So you cannot allow the fact that somebody says no to you to discourage you. Keep it moving, as the young kids say. Keep it moving. Because there will be a yes. All you need is one yes. I didn't need a yes from all the law schools. I just need to get into a law school. And not getting into the other 9 did not prevent me from doing what I wanted to do in my life. It didn't prevent me at all from doing what I want to do. But when you're in that position, you feel bad about it because, gosh, I got another no, I got another no, I got another no. All you need is one yes. I needed one yes from the University of Memphis Law School. I needed one yes from Mr. Shorstein, who hired me at the state attorney's office. I needed one yes from Governor Bush. I didn't need everybody to say yes to me. Just those people were important. So you have to start looking at it that way too. I don't need a yes from everyone. Yes, I wanted this job, but maybe this job is not what's best for me. Maybe that's not the job that was intended for me. Because you don't want to be in a place where you're miserable. So change your perspective about people saying no to you, not receiving the things that you think you deserve. Because I thought I deserved getting into all those law schools because I worked really hard. But I didn't get in. I had to keep it moving. Because what was I going to do? Sit down and wallow because I didn't get into 3 law schools? I got into 1. And I'm grateful for that. So be grateful for what you have. Make sure your perspective is the right perspective as it relates to negative things, what appears to be something negative. Try and see it through the lenses of a positive outlook. When something happens, try and see the positive side of it instead of the negative. Mr. Shorstein, when he interviewed me, he said, you have a 2.8, you're from Detroit, so you're probably going to get homesick and want to go home. And he just made me think, oh my gosh, he's not going to hire me. And I said, Mr. Shorstein, if you give me an opportunity, I'll be the best lawyer you've ever had. And he did. And I worked my tail off for him because I appreciated him hiring me. I appreciated him taking a chance on me. And I knew that I could be a good lawyer. If only somebody would get me into a courtroom, I knew I'd be a good lawyer. But everybody didn't want to take a chance on the 2.8. And Mr. Shorstein did. And Mr. Shorstein was the very first person to tell me, apply for judge now. And I'd only been practicing law 6.5 years. And Mr. Shorstein said, sitting next to him was a lawyer in our office who was applying and had already told everybody she was applying. And he looked at me while she was sitting there and said, you apply because you're the best person for it. And I was like, Mr. Shorstein, I've only been practicing 6.5 years. You need to apply. And so I did. But you can't, what if I would have been at a different office? What if I would have been upset because such and such didn't hire me out of law school? I was where I needed to be. And Mr. Shorstein was who I needed at that time. And all the lawyers he put, including Melissa, one of the lawyers who worked there before me and who I looked up to, all of those people were who I needed at that time. But had I been so focused on somebody else saying no to me, I would have missed what was my opportunity to learn from people and to become the best that I could be. And say, Melissa's here moderating, but she was one of the best trial lawyers in our office. And I wanted so bad to learn from her and try cases with her because she was organized. There were things that I just saw that I wanted to implement in my trial skills. So, I mean, it's just so many things that you could miss out on being worried about the past and what has already happened and who said no to you. Focus on going forward.
And your adversity didn't just end in Detroit. When you became a prosecutor, you were diagnosed with cancer.
Yes.
Talk about how that adversity and that challenge, how you faced it and how you worked through it.
You know, it's an interesting thing about life because not only that, my diagnosis, my daughter, I've now had a daughter who has been born with a visual disability. She has albinism. That means my daughter who was born to 2 brown parents is white with green eyes and blonde hair. And everybody's like, where did this white baby come from? I don't know, but I had her. But I mean, it's just, when you're faced with adversity and you choose to use what you have to overcome it, you have the tools you need whenever adversity comes your way. So the fact that I grew up the way that I did gave me strength of character when it was time to face other adversity in my future. So I suggest that you look at adversity as a way to overcome, as a way to develop the tools you need to overcome things in the future, because life will throw things at you you did not intend to face. So I suggest to you that you take your adversity and turn it into something that you can use to benefit you. And that's about perspective again. Because if you take your adversity and you just buckle under it, what's going to happen when you face adversity in the future? So I suggest you use it to develop some tools you need to face adversity in the future. So overcoming those things in my young adult life prepared me for my diagnosis, the diagnosis of my daughter. And for me, the state attorney's office, they were my family, because I was here by myself in Detroit with no family when I was sick. And so those people corralled around me And I worked. I didn't take any time off, although I was in treatment, because that took my mind off of what I was facing. So I went to the hospital for chemotherapy, then I went to work. I would be sick in the bathroom and go pick a jury. And Judge Day was my judge at the time, and he was like, "Are you sure you want to pick a jury?" I was like, "I'm positive I want to pick a jury, and I'm about to kick their tail. I'm about to kick the other side's tail." Because I was in a fight of my life, and that was my way to fight as well in court and to keep doing my job. It gave me strength, because being at home, you just kind of wallow in what's taking place with you. So I think it's so important to use adversity to develop strength of character, to develop mental toughness, to develop physical toughness, to develop spiritual toughness. You have to become mentally, spiritually, physically tough to deal with some of the things that you will face, that we will face in life. And so use adversity to your advantage versus allowing it to knock you down. Because my mentality, see, I'm from the ghetto, y'all, so I had to fight growing up. So now I come out swinging at adversity. You back me into a corner, I'm coming out swinging, and I'm gonna win. So I tried to use those attributes that were negative when I was younger as a positive now. I don't let anything knock me down, and I fight back. And you wanna have that mentality about life too. You don't wanna just take what's thrown at you. You wanna fight back.
Clearly, you embody such optimism and a positive attitude, and anybody that spends time with you gets that from you. What do you think about servant leadership and giving back and the value of it, and how do you employ it in your own life?
I think it's imperative to give back, because, for example, my being here, Melissa being here, we don't get paid for this. We do it for the love of community, for the love of students, for the love of education, and you are our future leaders. And if we're not imparting them to you, it affects our future community, our future local government, our future state government, our future national government. So I think it's so important that we see that our life is not just about ourselves and not take a selfish outlook on life. Yes, we should become successful, but our success should impact others to become successful, because it benefits us as a whole. And I think it's so important to serve in your local communities and your professions that you're involved in. Get involved in those clubs and activities, because it helps the community as a whole overall. And I am so very active in my church, in my local community. I speak in schools and high schools all the time, in our university community. I teach at the Judicial College, so I teach new judges. I'm on the faculty of the Judicial College, so I think it's important to serve. And out of all the things that I just listed that I do, I don't get paid for any of them. I do it because I love our community and I love our world as a whole. And if we don't do our part, you as an individual, if you don't do your part, then, and nobody's doing their part, then it affects all of us. So I think it's important to see what your gifts are and become involved in your community and your school community and then your local community as well.
So we're about to start taking questions, but before we do, if you had one piece of advice to give this group of emerging leaders, you've talked about a lot of different things, what would it be?
I would suggest that you have courage in your convictions, that you have courage to do the things that you believe is in your path. Don't be afraid, because fear will stop you from doing some amazing things. And when you really think about what am I afraid of, those things are small in comparison to what your impact could be. So have courage, and I would also suggest that you look at your life today as college students and you start to practice what you want to see in your adult life as a professional. My track coach used to say, practice makes perfect. It's perfect practice makes perfect. You do it today, being on time, keeping your word, being a person of integrity, developing your leadership skills. If you do it now, it's going to be easy when you become an adult in the working world. So perfect practice makes perfect. Start now, being who you want to be, seeing who you want to be, and start to develop your character to that end. We are always improving. So it does not stop here. It does not stop when you become a professional. Always improving to become better. So those are the things I would suggest to our emerging leaders.
Thank you. Do we want to open this up for questions now?
Please, yes.
Okay.
We have a microphone on each side if you have a question. While someone's coming up, I would say this. Henry Ford once said, his observation is that people get ahead during the time that others waste. That is so, it's just so true, it's profound. Think about the people you went to high school with. You decided to go to school, some people did not. You're getting ahead in the time that they're wasting. Or you decided to start working. They still have not decided to find a job because they're finding themselves. You're getting ahead during the time that they waste. So that is a profound statement that Henry Ford made and that I have adopted, and I keep it at the forefront of my thinking. People get ahead during the time that others waste. Don't waste your time. Use it in a meaningful way to benefit yourself and others. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Taylor Bump, and I'm a junior. And I believe you presided over my jury duty selection, so it's nice to see you again.
What a small world.
So I was wondering, how did you distinguish between those negative comments that you were hearing and constructive criticism, and kind of put weight where it needed to be, but still pursue what your vision was?
That is a very good question. How do you distinguish between negative comments and constructive criticism? You have to weigh it. When you hear comments from someone, when I hear comments from someone, because as judges, every single decision we make, somebody loses. So somebody's always unhappy with you. So someone's always criticizing you. So when I hear criticisms, or if I hear something that can appear as a criticism, I really look inside myself and I think, is there any weight to what they're saying? And if so, I try and make the adjustment. If not, it goes out the window and I don't think on it again. I say all the time to Melissa and my other friends, don't let it touch your thought life again. That means change the thought as soon as it comes. Because I don't want people weighing me down with their negativity, but I want to be open enough to make changes that benefit me as well as other people. So you have to weigh it to decide how it affects you and if it should benefit you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My name is Maria, and I'm majoring in international business. And you as a woman of influence, do you think there are differences between men and women in a leadership role?
I think there are differences between men and women. I would say, Melissa, please add because Melissa's she's in a huge international firm, so please add in if you think there's something that you can share. I think it's important as a woman, sometimes we have to balance things a little differently because of how we may come across as opposed to our counterparts. So I think it's important to be introspective in the way we lead. Because you'll hear people say a man was aggressive, but a woman was a bitch, because of how we can come across. So I think it's always important to look at ourselves and make sure that we're leading in a positive way. Because although it's not always fair that there are differences between men and women. Melissa, you have anything to add?
No, I would agree with that completely. There are long-held perceptions that are not necessarily truth. But I think women, in order to be effective, need to recognize those perceptions when they are in leadership roles. And how they go about acknowledging them and internalizing them to make sure that they overcome them, I think can be different for every person. But I think it's overcoming perceptions that you recognize.
And when you bring up a good point as it relates to women in leadership who are also wives and mothers. There's a perception there about our abilities, about being able to balance it all. And for me at least, and I know for Melissa too, just because we're friends, we try not to take it personally because counterparts may feel that way, because it is what it is. If you feel like, when I got pregnant and I was on the bench and got pregnant, you'd have thought I grew 2 heads because it just was not common for a judge on the bench to have a baby because most of the women judges were older. So, but I didn't get offended by that. It was what it was, but I had to work within that framework and still move forward despite those perceptions by my counterparts. So it's important to not take it personally and to just make sure your perspective is a positive one as it relates to whatever challenges you may face. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Good day, Your Honor. My name is Christopher Regan, and my question is, like, what would be the one moment in your life that just sparked in you the desire to just completely change who you are and your surroundings just for the better?
I would have, if I have to pick one, I would pick the death of my brother, because it was devastating to me that he died and he was on such a good track. So I think that was the most profound thing that happened at that time in my life that caused me to make a shift in what I was doing. So I would have to pick that at that time, although many things have happened since then. Thank you for asking.
My pleasure.
Good day.
Good morning. My name is Juan Carlos Villatora. I'm a senior major in interdisciplinary studies. My question is, how did you overcome gender and racism in your respective field?
Well, I think that happens in many areas, not just the practice of law. We can face some of those obstacles. I decided early on, because I was in an office where there were very few African Americans. There were a significant number of women, but very few African Americans. I decided early on to use that to my benefit, because when you try certain cases, each lawyer has strengths and gifts and abilities. So I would often help on cases where the victims or the witnesses were predominantly African American and were not meshing with the Caucasian lawyer. And some people, especially my family members, thought that was a negative, that they used me for that purpose. I thought it was a gift, because it allowed me to let my talent shine, because I got to trial more often and I got to show my versatility. So I try to use those instances, if there's what people perceive as racism or sexism, I try to use it to benefit me and to see the positive in it. Like we've been talking about perspective the whole morning. I try to change my perspective about it, because I can't change what other people think or feel, but I can change their perspective if I get in front of them. And that's happened a lot. I had an older male judge who kept calling me little lady. He was retired from St. Augustine. He kept calling me little lady. He would ignore me in court. I was trying a case with a white male. He would ignore me in court. Sharon Arnold was my first chair. He would ask a question, and if I tried to answer, he would look over at the male lawyer. And I was hot under the collar, but I didn't let it show. I just kept doing my job. Then I gave a closing argument. After I gave my closing argument, he called me up to the bench and he said, "You are an amazing advocate." And it changed his perspective. Now, had I been angry black woman, acted disrespectfully, been held in contempt, took it personally, he may not have even gotten to see how good I was at my job. He may not have gotten to see past my race, past my gender, but he was able to see it because I responded appropriately. Because you can't change how people treat you and what they say to you, but you can change how you respond to it. And often how you respond to it in a positive way will set you up for success when you don't even realize it, because other people are watching you. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, Your Honor. My name is Savannah, and I was just wondering what made you want to go to law school?
I think initially I didn't, but people would say, "You argue so much, you should be a lawyer." My teachers would say that, and I think a lot of young lawyers will say their parents or their teachers told them, "You debate all the time, you should be a lawyer," because I was so mouthy. And the other thing was my brother wanted to be a lawyer. So I think when he died, it kind of sparked in me a desire to kind of pick up his dream. But my first encounter with lawyers, because there were no lawyers in my family or my neighborhood, my first encounter with lawyers was at the trial of the man who killed my brother. So I got to see a judge and I got to see a prosecutor. And it left a positive impact on me. So I think that kind of paved the way for me to go into government service as a lawyer initially. So it was the death of my brother and his dream to be a lawyer.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jessica. I'm a senior in exercise science. I was wondering what events did you do in track?
100, that's so funny. 100, 200, 440 relay, and 880 relay a long time ago.
And then what was your favorite?
The 100.
The 100?
I was a sprinter, and surprisingly enough, because people used to say I was too thick to be a sprinter, but I was fast. And I tell this story all the time. I think I was fast because I would punch people and then turn around and run. I promise that's what I would do. I was so terrible. But I think that's how I got fast. But funny about exercise science. When I sit on panels with people, they often will be like, oh, I'm on a panel with the judge. It's so sweet and so neat. I was on a panel with an ultra runner. And she works here, right? And UNF, the ultra runner? Yes. And she said, oh, it's so cool, I'm on a panel with the judge. I was like, oh, it's so cool, I'm on a panel with an ultra runner. Because that's amazing. An ultra runner runs like 100 miles in 2 days or something, or 3 days. It was amazing. So that is an example of the gifts that we all have. She was impressed that she was with me, and I was impressed that I was with her because I saw so much in the fact that I saw so many attributes for a person to be disciplined enough to do exercise science or be an ultra runner. That takes discipline. And discipline is so key in what we do as leaders. So I think that's amazing and great that you're in exercise science.
Awesome, thank you.
Good morning, Judge Cox. My name is Andrew Coconato. I'm a senior here at UNF, and my major is communication. But I have a question for you. A lot of times, I think as human beings, we obviously like to show our strengths. And as you're talking about, show your strengths and utilize that. And a weakness of mine that I've identified is showing my weaknesses. And I think vulnerability, I think people have interpreted vulnerability as a weakness. And I've heard other people say being vulnerable is actually a strength. And I was wondering what your opinion on that was. Do you consider vulnerability as a strength through experience?
I would say, Melissa, please pipe up if you have some thoughts on this. Just initially thinking about that, I think vulnerability could be a strength in certain instances. I think in personal relationships it can be. I think if you're in a relationship, if it's in the work context with, depending on the context, if you're with someone you trust, a leader, and you're trying to express something and it shows that you're being vulnerable, I think that can be okay, because I think you want to be honest and forthright in what you feel your weaknesses are and strengths are so that person can mentor you effectively. So I think it can be a positive, but I think you need to look at the context in which you show that you're being vulnerable.
I think that's exactly right. I actually just had a conversation with a group of people in a context similar to this about vulnerability and the vulnerable leader. I think that's a little different than transparency and honesty that you point out, and I think those can be attributes that inspire people and very good leadership attributes. I think vulnerability can be dangerous in professional settings. I think it's different than transparency. I do think it's very important in interpersonal relationships.
So be very conscious of it. And I would say, because I was a female lawyer, my mantra was always, I never want to see my female lawyers crying in the office. You may cry with your door locked, you may cry at home, but I don't want to hear that you're crying in the office, because I thought it showed that we were being vulnerable and we already had perceptions to overcome. I did cry in court once. After I said that, I cried in court the day I interviewed for this position, because the case was so emotionally charged, because it was a 16 and 17-year-old facing life in prison, and I was the prosecutor. And when I looked out at the crowd and I saw the family of the defendants, who were A students facing significant sentences, and I looked at the family of the victim, the young man who died, I just became overwhelmed with emotion at what poor choices led to. And I cried in court that day. And I thought about it, I was like, I've been telling all these women lawyers as their boss not to cry, and I just cried in court. But I think you have to certainly take the context into consideration when it's in a professional setting as well.
Great question.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for sharing.
Hi, my name is Katie Herman. I'm a criminal justice major. My question for you is, you talked about growing from adversity and not letting fear control your actions. What suggestions do you have in order to, it's one thing to have that idea in your head, but how do you go about doing something like that?
I'm sorry, you said, I couldn't hear the end. You said?
How do you go about doing that, not letting, growing from adversity and making changes and not letting fear control you?
How do you actually do it?
Yeah.
I'll tell you how, because I'm doing it now. I'm applying for circuit court. Circuit court is our next level of state court here in Jacksonville. I have to go through the same process I went through before, and I did it 10 years ago. And when I thought about doing it this year, I was like, what am I thinking? That was so hard, but I'm doing it. And I interviewed next Wednesday for it, as a matter of fact. So I faced some fear these last few months when I thought about the fact that I'm putting myself under a microscope again, for people to judge me and to look at what I've been doing and to criticize what I've been doing. And I had to make a decision. Was I going to let that fear stop me, or was I going to push for my dream of becoming a circuit court judge? And I decided to push for it. But what happens is when I made my list, because I make my list again on how to become a circuit court judge, I get to one person and it says, I need to call them. And I'm like, I don't even know him. What is he going to say when I call him? He doesn't know me. And I felt the fear coming up, and I picked up the phone and called right then. Because the hardest thing on my list, I did first. So that's how you start to face your fears. When you know what the fear is, you jump right on top of it and do whatever it is that dispels that fear from controlling you. And interestingly enough, I made the call, I went to his office, and he said to me, Judge Cox, your reputation precedes you. I'm going to do whatever I can to help you. And I was afraid to call him. And had I let that fear stop me, he would have been at the bottom of my list. And now he's one of my biggest supporters and very important to my support. So you really have to change the perspective about what the fear means, because the fear usually means, in these type of cases, I'm nervous about what they're going to think about me, what they're going to say about me, how they're going to react to me. But when you've already been working on your perspective not to allow what people think about you, what they say about you, determine who you are, it helps you to just jump right on it. And because now my mindset is, okay, just whatever they think about me, I don't know what to do about all that. I can just tell them who I really am. So you have to jump right on top of it. You have anything to add, Mel, about fear?
Thank you.
I will say this, I think everything you said today is such a demonstration of using the mind as a tool and controlling it. And I know you achieve that through quiet reflection. And I think you're a great example of the fact that we can either perpetuate negativity or choose, and use our mind to do so, choose to perpetuate optimism. You're just a great success story.
Thank you. May I ask, is there anyone here who feels that as a result of your time with us, you have been motivated, inspired, or encouraged to meet your personal, professional, or social goals? Please raise your hand if you feel like you have. That's what a leader does. Thank y'all. Thank y'all so much.